What is going on? The Yosemite Guide here, coming at you from my backyard. Got my local lake that I walk pretty much every day with my dogs. Really pretty out here. It's a great barefoot trail as well. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about Mount Whitney and the things you can do to make your trip better, some of the problems that could arise, and just kind of emphasize the challenges that you will face on that hike. So it's a very serious hike, 22 miles round trip with a 6,000 foot elevation gain. You're starting at over 8,000 feet, so there's that extra challenge there. But there's a couple different ways you can handle that elevation. Definitely acclimating is one of the best ways, and that's by getting a wilderness permit and hiking up halfway to the backpackers camp and sleep there and get an early start on the trail. And that's over 10,000 feet where you'd camp out there. Or you could just get a reservation at the Whitney Portal campground. That's always a good choice. And you could do that through recreation.gov and book your campsite there. And that way you'll be, staying at 8,000 feet and help your body adjust a little bit to the elevation. You'll be ready to tackle that 14,500 foot summit on there. So definitely some things that you'll want to bring on your hike. You're going to want bug spray. You're going to want sunscreen. That sun is so intense getting up at the higher elevation. So you definitely, got to protect the skin. You want to make sure you have a water filter. That is important. You go through a lot of water on this hike. Probably, 3.5 liters going up. And then you could filter on the way down. However you want to do it, or carry less and filter, halfway up. But water filter is critical. I would recommend having a GPS as well on this hike. Doing any nighttime hiking, whether it's at the start or at the end, it's really easy to lose the trail when you're hiking at night. So GPS can be a lifesaver in that regard. Something else people really don't talk about is bringing toilet paper. You're on a long hike, sometimes duty calls, literally. But they do have the swag bags at the beginning, little poop bags. But you want to have toilet paper as well with you. And just know you got to pack it in, pack it out. People are leaving those poop bags all over the place. It's so gross. Make sure you clean up after yourselves. Don't be one of the nasties. So that's another thing there. And something else you want to be aware of always is the weather. The weather is a huge factor in this hike. And depending on the time of year, you'll have to deal with bigger creek crossings. If you're trying to do this in June, it's important to be aware of what kind of winter you had the previous winter and know, are we going to run into huge snow drifts? Do I need crampons, yak tracks, something like that? But I'd say ideally July, August are probably the best months for it. But even then you get thunderstorms that roll in. You just got to really be aware of the weather. And with that being said, you want to make sure you're geared up for anything, have a raincoat for sure. But know, depending on the conditions, what kind of clothing you're going to need if you're going to be out hiking back in the dark and you're up over 10,000 feet. It's going to be cold, no matter what month it is. So make sure you're prepared for that. Maybe have some gloves are always a good idea to carry on you. And doing this as a day hike, I recommend getting as early as start as possible. I think it's better to hike in the dark at the beginning than at the end when you're tired. So I recommend starting from Whitney Portal around 3:30, 4 a.m., 4 a.m. at the latest. That'll give yourself time to get up there, and you could pace yourself and know where you're at. Also know, depending on if you're early summer or late summer, that sun's going to set sooner. And you might think what time the sun sets, but when you're coming down those switchbacks and you're in a little valley, it gets darker a lot sooner and a lot faster than you think it might. But I'd say getting an early start is key to success. And honestly, like starting out before the sun comes up and you watch the sunrise on that first couple miles, it's an amazing view of that valley there, and just watching the sun come up, it's pretty amazing. I definitely recommend. I'd say being prepared is key on this hike as well. Something I'm not super great at, you know, making a checklist. That was one huge mistake I made, was leaving my GoPro batteries at the hotel that I was staying at. Just a little bit unorganized, but make a checklist, make sure you got everything. I'd say getting a good night's sleep is really important as well. You know, it's a psychological warfare on this hike, really. So if you're sleep deprived, you're not eating well, it's gonna affect you. So I'd say these are some important things that you want to consider when you're doing this hike. And you got to kind of figure out how much you want your packed away on this thing, because you know, you want to bring enough food to sustain you. Maybe you want some other important items, such as like a charging bank for your phone, so you got extra battery. But then you got to make sure your pack's not gonna weigh, you know, 40 pounds or whatever, because that'll be a tough time. And so those are some things to consider there. And I think it's important to have an alternate leader on your permits, especially if you're in a little bit of a bigger group and you got different skill levels. You can have kind of two different paces going there, because you always want to be with the permit holder, group leader in the permit zone. You're supposed to be with them at all times, so that's important. The initial lottery to put in for Mount Whitney permits is in February on that recreation.gov website, so you got to plan a little bit early for that. On that note too, you want to know, you know, what kind of people you're hiking with. If you're not that experienced and aren't in the best of shape, you know, you might not want to go with some Billy Mountain goat that's running up the trail, you know. So it's definitely something to consider. You know, what skill level of people are you going with? Are they okay hanging back? Are you okay hanging back? And just staying together. One thing that we experienced heading out of there, we had the last 3.5, 4 hours hiking out in the dark. I was a little bit worried about letting my wife know we were okay and made it out. So a couple of us kind of ran ahead and wanted to get down to cell signal. There's actually a spot, it was about 1.7 miles up the trail from Whitney Portal, where you got cell signal, which was pretty cool. So there's no cell signal at Whitney Portal. You'd have to go down to Lone Pine to get cell signal. You can get signal on top of Mount Whitney if you have Verizon. AT&T doesn't work very well. Just the whole east side, Verizon works a little bit better than AT&T. Different carriers in different locations work better. East side just happens to be Verizon, but I know people were getting signal, at least one or two bars up top with Verizon, so that's kind of cool, something to be aware of. And it always feels good to get out on the bare feet. It's pretty nice. It's a good place to be. And we've got these super docile coyotes out here. This one's pretty friendly. I guess keeping the geese off the lawn here. Interesting. Looks pretty real though. So another thing you want to be aware of too is this is not the hike to break in a new pair of shoes on. Anytime you're doing, you know, 20 plus miles, you got to have some good footwear. I mean, I know I was barefoot and flip-flops, but that's better than wearing a new pair of boots. So something else to keep in mind, bring some band-aids. 2 pairs of socks, you know, wearing double socks, extra padding on there could help, you know, avoid some of those blisters you might get on these longer hikes. And something else to be aware of when you're in an area with no cell signal for an extended period of time, you could go on to airplane mode. That way your phone's not constantly searching for signal and draining your battery there. So, and maybe a good idea to bring a backup battery charging pack. You know, I had a large one. Luckily it was good for my GoPro, but my cord actually went out on the way back down, so had some difficulty, you know, filming the end of that hike there. But yeah, definitely a backup battery pack, and airplane mode could help extend your battery life. All right, and I gotta see if I can find my pet duck, Sherman. If I can call him. Sherman! 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 There he is. There he comes. He was hiding out. Now he's like a heat-seeking missile coming for his duck food. So there's a lot of Canadian geese out here. I don't feed those ones, are wild. These are like farm ducks that someone dropped off here. They can't fly, so I don't feel weird eating them. Here's Sherman right here. He's so funny. Hey buddy, there you go. That's a good boy. Yeah. Here's Jordan. Jordan's a little more shy. Then we got Mama Penny here. Okay, okay. There you go. I love it. Sure, man. All right, so that about does it for this one. Hopefully some of that information might help you out there. I'd say just plan well, train hard. You know, doing Clouds Rest from Yosemite Valley floor. That's a good, definitely a good warm up there. You got 6,000 feet of elevation gain in that. It only tops out at 10,000 feet, but it'll give you a pretty good idea of what you're in for. So that's definitely a good training one. Hope you enjoyed the little talk time here, and we'll catch you soon. Peace out. Love you.